Hello everyone, I am Hara. I am a director of Hyogo Prefecture Deaf Welfare Association. I'm in charge of labor issues. Well, first of all, let me explain about myself so that you can better understand. I am born with a hearing disability, and when I was 1 to 2 years old, I started using a hearing aid and also trained myself in oral method to communicate with others. And maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I had a friend who was deaf, and I learned sign language. And my hearing level is about, for both of my eyes, around 95 decibel. So if I take off my hearing aid, I cannot hear anything. So if, for example, there was a car next to me or a bus, I cannot hear. If someone called me from behind, I would not be able to recognize. So visual information is everything. So if I see something moving or somebody talking to me, if visually I can understand. And if I take off my hearing aid, for example, if there was a jet airplane right next to me, then I would maybe hear. Or if I'm in a bus, I'll take my hearing aid off, and if I speak in a very loud voice, I can hear. So that is the level of my hearing loss. So normally I commute to my company, and the problem I have is basically interpersonal communication. And for example, we are now in a COVID pandemic, and most people are wearing masks. And when people are wearing masks, the voice becomes muffled. And in those circumstances, I use iPhone or Android smartphone to have a voice recognition in order to be able to communicate or ask people to write notes or to use sign language. So one-to-one communication, I can ask the other person to write notes. That's easy to ask, but for example, when we have a meeting with maybe 2 or 3 participants, or when we have a morning meeting at a company, or maybe usually a company president will give a New Year address every year. So there is a distance between the speaker, and then I cannot hear very well. So that is one of my problems. So even outside of my work, for example, in a hospital, like when I have to go to the receptionist, then I would go to be diagnosed, to see the doctor. And if I'm hospitalized, I have to communicate with the nurses. And in hospitals, I'm not feeling very well, naturally. And my hearing level goes down. And that makes communication extra difficult. And in a hospital, if there is a hearing loop which sends FM signal to my hearing aid directly, that would be very convenient. But not all hospital has a hearing loop. And so I ask people to speak into my smartphone, which is an extra step, extra process. So you cannot have a real-time communication, so that it sort of hinders smooth communication. And the communication tends to be superficial. I want to communicate at a deeper level, it's very difficult. So the other day, I was traveling in my car. I was on a highway, and there is an electronic toll collection system. The bar closed, and the ETC system is unmanned. So I was wondering how I should communicate. So there was a button for communication. I pressed it, and somebody was talking. And he was talking about a microphone. So it was very difficult to hear. So if there was a system that would have a voice recognition and show it on the windscreen of my car, and I could then say, please wait. And on the highway, for example, the traffic information that is available on the radio, and sometimes I cannot hear too well, so if such traffic information can be displayed on the windscreen in text, that would be very convenient for me. And also about the parking space, there is a discount for people with disability. And right now, the parking spaces are unmanned. So I would show my disability certificate, and I have to use the speaker to communicate. But if you have some kind of a monitor together, and if I can see the speaker's face, that would be much more convenient for me. As for a television, so you have recently YouTube, there is a subtitle is available. And on television, for example, like in the Olympics and Paralympic Games, the commentary comes out like 10 seconds later. And also, if we can have a sign language interpreter appear on the screen on the television, that would be good too. And also, if we can, subtitles could be provided in English to, for example, non-Japanese viewers. I think these kind of features will be very helpful. So now I am speaking, and some people think, do you really have a hearing disability? And I have a hearing aid inside my ear, but it's not visible. So most people cannot tell that I'm wearing a hearing aid. So this is a disability that is considered as an invisible disability in some sense. So because I have a hearing disability, I look at the speaker's mouth and also the face when I communicate. And if you were able to see the other person, you don't have to watch the other person's face to be able to know what the others are saying. For example, in a school classroom, they can hear or and write down notes. But for me, I cannot hear, listen, and write at the same time. And I asked the other people with this hearing disability, and they also told me that they could not listen and write at the same time. So, for example, there is a application called UD Talk, which recognizes voice and gives output in text, which is very convenient. So when I'm traveling on the train, I often go out. I also commute to my company by train. And usually I can reach the destination. But sometimes the train is stopped for emergency. The train doesn't leave the station sometimes. And the conductor would make an announcement and say they're having an inspection and the train has to stop, or somebody has turned on the emergency switch, and this kind of information, for me, I cannot respond quickly. For those people who are hearing, they will be able to understand the announcement and respond quickly. So I have to use a Twitter and say, has something happened to the train? And then, or 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, I would then know what had happened. And others would already have left the train to get on board another train, and I would be left behind. So, for example, if there was a hearing loop in the train, or a subtitles, or voice recognition, that would provide timely information, real-time information, that would be very convenient. And this is not limited to trains. Could also be used in airports, inside the ship, or maybe city bus or highway bus. So if all information can be provided like UD Talk, I would appreciate it very much. So I mentioned about hospital just now. So when I make the payment at the hospital, the receptionist will call out Mr. Hara. They call out your name. But they are like very similar name, like Ehara-san or Tahara-san. And hospitals, the sound is reverberating, and it's very difficult to distinguish the names. And the receptionist would say, Hara-san, and I would say yes. And she would say, no, I was calling Mr. Ehara. And people around me might think that, what is he doing? So there is a pager like this one here. I purchased this and I give one to the other and I hold one. So like if you go to a food court, like if you made an order and when the food is ready, the pager would buzz. So this is quite expensive actually, maybe like $300. So, but I have to carry this all the time, which is not very convenient. So if you could like have this feature linked to a smartphone, and then that would be even more convenient than a pager. Well, as for radio, I have never really listened to radio since I was born. So if you can use a smartphone, you could have access to emergency information or maybe a traffic information about delays. But for example, in a disaster, when the television is unavailable, most people use radio to collect information. But for me, I cannot hear too well, and depending on the quality of the speakers, things are even more difficult. Some radios, the sound is not very good. And when I'm listening to the radio, if they can convert the sound to text for voice recognition, that would be convenient too. So when I use a taxi, I sometimes use taxi, for example, when it's raining very hard. I use a taxi to go home. And sometimes the taxi driver would try to start a conversation with me. And sometimes I cannot hear him very well. So I pretend I understand and say yes, yes, yes. But sometimes, it's very awkward. So if there's a taxi driver, the conversation could be converted to text. That would be convenient too. So during the COVID pandemic, I started cooking at home. And I use the fridge. I use a kettle to boil water. I use the gas oven. And all these utensils produce sound. I didn't know that. So if I keep the fridge open, apparently there's a warning sound. And also the kettle, when the water boils, it makes sound. And also the ventilator. I did not used to hear the sound. So if I keep the fridge open, my family members would say that the fridge is open. You have to close it. So I would hope that I could hear all these sound. So from the kettle, there is a very high-pitched sound, and there's other types that have low-pitched sound. And this low-pitched sound, my family members don't like very much. So if they would play a melody, that would be nice too. And the fridge are very expensive, so if they could make an announcement in low-pitched word, or maybe they can have a flashlight to warn you that the fridge door is open. I think that would be improve our quality of life. As for the telephone, we have a product called Mieru phone, which converts sound into text, which is very convenient. And during the COVID, somebody will come at the door, and there is an intercom. We use a flashlight to know that somebody is at the door. The light flashes over the intercom, but then when we have to communicate orally, I cannot hear and cannot communicate. So if I could also have a voice recognition at the intercom, that would be good too. So in the same light, if you go to, for example, the McDonald's or maybe other drive-through services, so I don't go through the drive-through. I park my car and then I go to the restaurant to pick up the food. So most people wouldn't do that. They would just go through the drive-through. And you have to communicate with the restaurant staff. And if there was like a monitor, that would be nice. And when I take out food, like at a fast food restaurant, the environment is very noisy and people wearing masks. So the communications is very much limited. So but voice recognition doesn't work in that kind of environment, so I need to ask people to write notes. But if we could have, for example, like a board with illustrations that I can point, I want this product or I want this, and that is shown, placed on the table, and if we can communicate like that, I think the communication will be better. So we do get support from people around us, but basically we want to promote self-advocacy and self-efficacy so that we can live independently and feel a meaning of life. And I think many people share this feeling, to be able to live, to have a better quality of life through better accessibility and usability in our communication. As I mentioned earlier about the mask, so it's covered the mouth, and also because of that the voice is muffled. And sometimes we do have a transparent mask is available, but transparent masks are not tightly fitting so that the virus comes out. So if we can have a better sealed masks, I think that would be nice. I think there's a company called Unicharm is selling a very high quality transparent masks. So if we can have similar products, we can have a better communication even with us wearing masks. I think I pretty much covered everything I was thinking about. And going back to the drive-through, we communicate over the microphone, but maybe we can use a tablet, would be much better, and staff would sort of use touch screen, and then we can use a drive-through. Maybe that would be better. So I forgot to say at the beginning, but in Japan, we have people with hearing disability, maybe about 20 million people, which is like 1 in 3. They have some kind of hearing disability. And of course, there are different degrees from mild to severe. Like me, I'm a severe hearing loss. I cannot hear anything. But for the mild hearing loss, they sometimes have a difficulty hearing, especially because we have many older people, like maybe a quarter of people in their 80s have mild hearing loss. And also for young people, they have a headphone-induced hearing loss. So this disability is is becoming a very familiar problem for most of us. So of course there is no problem if you can hear, but instead of relying on audible information, if we can rely more on visual information, that would improve the quality of life. And I did mention various ideas and problems we have, but most of them require some kind of smartphone as a solution. But I think my personal view is that smartphone will eventually disappear in the future. Like for example, the television or fridge and various other appliances, or maybe even a car. I think basically all the smartphone functions will be transferred to the devices, and they would have an AI chip installed, and they'll be connected by Wi-Fi, and they'll all be connected and exchanging information. And so ultimately, I think the smartphones will disappear, and we will probably hear sound from our fingertips. So if we have various appliances with high functionality levels, then like if the fridge door is open, they would, for example, if the fridge is kept open for about 1 hour, the fridge might notice that something has happened to the user, and they could then get in touch with the security company to send an SOS. So maybe that kind of system would then further improve the quality of life. So lastly, so even among people with hearing disability, some people can speak like me, and there are also people with speech disorders. So for them too, if we can have more visual information available and have new tools developed to make this possible, that would be very nice too. So that is all from me. Thank you very much.